I just wanted to see how crazy you were that you had to go down my phone. So now you're like, what? No. Do you know what? I can't be bothered with this. You're crazy. You're nuts. I'm going to leave you to sort your own life out.
There is something that I hear so often from women just over and over again about wondering if they are the toxic one, if they're the narcissist, if they are the abuser, or even if it's mutually abusive, if they're both causing problems. And it's so common, but it's not necessarily because you are controlling or actually abusive, but abusive men are actually really good at flipping the script on you and dragging you into thinking that you're the problem when that's not the case, because there is no such thing as mutual abuse. There can be mutual toxicity, of course, but let's talk about the ways that this can happen, the different methods and tactics used against people. I'm going to introduce my guest. I'm so excited to have you here, Emma Davey. We've actually done a project together. We were both in a film called I Love You, My Narcissist, coming out in 2026. But Emma, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me. So my name's Emma Davey. I'm a trauma-informed MBACP counsellor based in the UK. I'm also currently in the final stage of doing my master's degree in psychology of coercive and controlling behaviour. So very intense, but I work with victims that have suffered coercive control and domestic abuse and, of course, narcissistic abuse.
I'm so glad to see a therapist who has been through it that's actually treating people for this specific thing, because I know that lived experience makes it a little bit easier to understand. It's, of course, unfortunate that anybody has gone through this, but I'm sure that it helps you understand your clients a lot better, which is such a good thing. You must see this often, right? Where somebody comes to you and they're like, am I the problem? Am I the abuser?
All the time. I think anyone that's experienced this type of abuse will always question, is it me? Am I doing something wrong, or am I contributing to this? And it's also being told by the abuser that, yes, you are the problem, you are doing this. So you're being so heavily gaslit all the time that you are the problem. So you start to think, well, if I am the problem, then let's find the solution. So that's when you start to go into Fawn and start to people please, try to do everything you possibly can to try and make the abuser love you again, like make him love you like he did at the very beginning, because he was fine when you met him. He was Mr. Perfect, right? So it must be me that's changed him because he's so wonderful. And that's what people keep referring to, is always the beginning. And then as you're being chipped away at, it's your fault, you've done this, look at you, that you really start to internalize and try and find the problem within yourself to try and find the solution to make yourself safe.
Yeah. I find they don't just hurt you, they change the way you think. They change the way you see yourself.
Absolutely, yes. And that's because they're breaking you. You know, with coercive controlling behaviour, it's not designed to break your bones, it's designed to break your mind. So the way that you used to think is no longer the way that you think now, because you are being moulded into the version that the abuser wants you to be and to believe.
It's the absolute worst, you get molded into this thing and you don't even realize it's happening. I think it's really interesting how they get you to see yourself as the problem. The way that we're so able to just take that on. And you're right that it's very much related to the beginning of the relationship, because when he was kind, you almost can't imagine him being any other way. So if he's changed, there must be a reason. I also think that it's easier for us to think that we're the problem, because then we can control it. If I'm the problem, I can change. If he's the problem, I have no control over that.
And you want to believe that it's you at some point, because then, as you say, you've got some control of changing things. And you fell in love with a version that doesn't exist. So I always say you've fallen in love with a ghost. That person is never coming back. But when you're in it, it's really hard to see that you're in an abusive relationship, because it's not abusive 100% of the time. You're having good days, you're having moments. Now, obviously, as the relationship goes on, you're seeing that the good moments less and less and less. So you are being starved of so much love and affection that when you get fed a breadcrumb, you're literally being fulfilled so much and getting all the oxytocin, dopamine hits that you'll accept that. And then when it goes back again of them being nasty and horrible and abusive, you then will try everything you can to get back another bit of crumb of affection. So you take that responsibility on yourself to do that. We don't look at the narcissist and think, why are you not giving this to me? We look at what can we do to try and get that person back. So we take that responsibility on ourselves to make sure we look nice, to make sure the kids are ready, and we learn our role and we perfect it so well. And internally, we're doing it to make ourselves safe. But externally, we're probably just doing it so we get some form of affection and love and to have a good day.
Yeah, you get some of that nice guy back when you do that. Like the reward for surviving, for complying, for being maybe not always submissive. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but just being agreeable, not being combative, not questioning. You always get rewards with good behavior, and he's kinder that week or whatever. And then it makes you keep going. Now, you mentioned something about fawning, and I feel like we constantly talk about fight or flight. And the fawn response, I think, is incredibly common and the least understood. Can you talk a little bit about the fawn response?
The fawn response is a trauma response, and it happens when you're in an abusive relationship and you are constantly trying to appease the narcissist. You are trying to please them. You will make sure that you are on time or you look a certain way. So you're constantly scanning your environment and yourself to make sure that everything is perfect so that nothing upsets them. So it's constantly walking on eggshells, but also making sure that everything is right for them. Because if they're happy, then it's going to be a little bit easier. So you might notice it if they are coming home from work. So you know that at 5:30, they're going to be coming up the driveway. The hoovering's done, the cleaning's done, the washing's away, the kids have been fed, the kids have done their homework. You feel this surge of energy of like scanning everything. Everything's perfect. So when he walks through the door and he kind of looks around, and they always pick something though, just to make sure to put you back in that place of you're not good enough. But your body is in the fawn response of trying to appease the narcissist to make sure that you are safe when he walks through that door. And this has happened over months, years of him coming home and him picking something and then throwing the food across the room because it's too cold or it hasn't been cooked properly or the kids are not ready or whatever it is. You would have learnt this through consequences and embedded fear. So you might not even realize you're doing this, but you are in a fawn response.
I want people to really think about that. There's this feeling of like, I need to manage a mood. I need to change something. I need to clean. That sort of frantic feeling. I once made a video of, you hear the garage open or, you hear them coming home, the key in the door, and you leap off the couch and run around and try to tidy up. That would be a perfect example of a fawn response. It's this need to appease them so that nothing bad happens. And I know from the outside, people look at that and they're like, why is she making his dinner if he's abusive? And I feel like she's making his dinner because he's abusive. To me, it makes sense when you've experienced it, the way that we cater to and fawn over someone who's terrible to us creates confusion in ourselves too, of like, it's true, if he's so bad, why do I do this? He's controlling your behavior, but he's also controlling your interpretation of yourself and him, even planting little seeds that you're too sensitive or you misunderstand things. You are the problem. You see that constantly through gaslighting.
And that's again why you go into the fawn response, is because you've been told you can't cook. This is disgusting. You can't clean. Look at you. You're a mess. So you've had all of this stuff embedded in you. So you're now taking the responsibility of, I've got to do better. I need to cook this correctly. I've got to make sure I dress correctly. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Because you are, again, taking the responsibility of fixing these things that you're being told that you're not good enough on. So if I can just cook right, if I can dress correctly, then I won't be abused. Then he'll love me more. Then I would have done better. So you kind of go back in that childlike state of pleasing. And especially if you've come from an abusive family or an abusive parent, then this is very normal behavior of fawning, because it's how you have to do better for others as opposed to for yourself.
Yeah. I always talk about conditioning in these relationships, but the truth is we can be so conditioned prior to that, if you come from an inconsistent childhood or even neglect, not necessarily abuse in the sense of how we use it, but emotional neglect and taught to perform for love, taught to be helpful or quiet or kind and forgiving, as many women are. And then you end up in a relationship like this and it's like, oh my God, how did I get here? But here we are. I don't think women enter these relationships confused, but we definitely become confused in them. Now, I was mentioning gaslighting. There is a tactic that I know over the last few years has become a little bit more popular to talk about, but I'm big advocate because I think it's something that happens in so many abusive relationships and women don't have the language for it. Dr. Jennifer Freed coined a term called DARVO. I actually had her on the podcast a couple of seasons ago. We were talking about another term she coined called betrayal blindness. But DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And once people start to really understand what it is, usually I see people go, oh my God, yes, I've experienced this. Tell me what your experience is with your clients seeing DARVO, seeing people go, oh man, that's happening to me.
Well, luckily in the UK now, DARVO is recognised in the family and criminal court. And I think the family court is so important because we see this a lot in family court where you've got the abuser going to court pretending to be the victim and the victim actually being perceived as the perpetrator. But obviously with fact finds and evidence, we can prove it. But yes, it's being recognised now as this is a thing, which is good. But yeah, abusers are very, very clever when it comes to an audience. They know how to act. They know how to, kind of put their head down and, oh, this is what I deal with. I had it myself when I was going through it. They will make out that they are the innocent one, that they do all of these things for the wife and they do their best, but it's just never good enough. And you have the true victim kind of just like, how do they manage to do this? How do they manage to literally manipulate everybody around them? And again, this makes it so hard for true victims to come out and say, actually, here's the abusive one, because they've manipulated everyone around them thinking that you are the perpetrator and everyone's not talking to you now. I had it myself where my name was smeared and everyone thought I was the perpetrator. So it's really hard to try and not only come to terms with it yourself, but to try and come out and tell everybody else. And a courtroom, especially if you're having to go to court, it's horrendous because then you also have barristers, etc., calling you a liar. So DARVO is really important, and I'm so pleased it is being recognised in courts because this is part of the abuse. This is another layer on top of the abuse that they do to you. When I tell this to clients, and also when I say, well, actually, you can use this terminology in family court, the light bulb goes on, but there's also a little bit of relief of actually, is someone going to believe me?
Yeah.
So
it's hard to prove. I think that's where people kind of go like, well, okay, they're both an issue. And again, mutually toxic, sure, absolutely. Abuse does not go both ways. There's a perpetrator and there's a victim. So I know things are sort of nuanced, but I like to oversimplify sometimes, but I know when I'm doing it. But I think abuse is not going both directions, and an abuser will take an everyday sort of situation and immediately flip it. And you can see it in anything from like if you ask him to take the garbage out and he literally will play the victim of your nagging when really you shouldn't have to ask him a million times. Now, obviously that in and of itself is not abuse, but I'm talking about an abuser who does that. Or I don't know, I used a really controversial example once online about a woman felt like he was cheating. Her abuser, not just her partner, but someone who is abusive in other ways, felt like he was cheating. And so she went through his phone and found that he in fact was cheating. And of course, he flipped it on, how dare you, you invaded my privacy, what's wrong with you, you're insecure. But meanwhile, she caught him. And the comment section was actually wild. I have to admit, I didn't think it was that controversial until I made the post. It was a skit. And so many people were like, they're both bad. They are equally wrong. Cheating is wrong, but going through your partner's phone is wrong. And of course, I'm not going to disagree that your cell phone should be private and that nobody should just take it and sneak through it. I completely get that. And I know that perpetrators also do that. I get it. But in that context, I was like, what? Catching him was as bad as him doing it? It was mind-blowing. how much the audience was on, the side of no one. It was shocking. He literally was cheating. And I always wonder sometimes if it was reversed, if he had caught her cheating, if how much different the response would be. Maybe not at all, but I thought it was interesting. We start to defend and explain, and we get very off topic because I think as soon as the denial happens and then you push and then he attacks you, you immediately want to defend yourself. That's a brutal spot to be where you're so, no, but that's not true. And, I'm not a nag, or I went through your phone because whatever the flip is, but it makes us feel defensive. What do you think that does to the perpetrator? How does he feel in that moment, do you think?
Oh, he's been caught out. So he's got to deflect. Instead of taking ownership, I'm like, do you know what? Yes, I have been cheating. And it starts to explain. No, they're not going to do that. They're going to deflect and they're going to make it your fault because you've been going down their phone. Again, something that I've experienced myself personally. And the thing is, when a victim does go through the perpetrator's phone, it's probably been months that the victim has probably been in denial, making excuses, really trying to go through that betrayal blindness of it's not happening. Oh, he's late because of this. And we don't want it to be true. But so much has happened that the opportunity is there. And finally, part of us has gone, just look. If it's not there, just look for our own sanity, because we have been gaslit so much that for our own sanity, we just need proof. We just need to know. So when we do actually look down it and we see it in our own eyes, we finally have the proof. And we want to show the perpetrator of, look, see, you have been doing this to me because, again, we've been so gaslit, we've been lied to, we've been told that we're imagining things. No, we have the proof here. And instead of getting, yes, you're right, I'm sorry, we get, how dare you go down my phone? You are so crazy. You're obsessed with me. See, I've caught you. This was actually all a joke. I just wanted to see how crazy you are that you had to go down my phone. So now you're like, what? No. Do you know what? I can't be bothered with this. You're crazy. You're nuts. I'm going to leave you to sort your own life out. And then they will leave you with the silent treatment. So you get nothing. You actually get further abuse on top of that, where you then go through the silent treatment. Because the silent treatment is so horrendous, because it can go on for days. When they finally do start speaking to you again, you'll forget it. Because it's just easier just to go with it, pretend it didn't happen, to carry on, because life's so horrific that, and that's where you start to snowball. You really start to lose yourself, and you think you actually accept this behavior because the consequences are even worse. So the next time you think he's cheating, you won't say anything.
Exactly. You'll just stay completely quiet. I think where women even start to go like, you're right, I shouldn't have gone through his phone. And again, the two things can be true. Yes, technically she shouldn't have. And a lot of women, I think, a lot of people, in fact, oversimplify it of, if you need to go through their phone, you already know that you can't trust this person and you should end it. But I feel like, again, it just leads you back into this confusion. You are the problem. So why would you break up with someone who you've made crazy? He was a great guy. And if you turned him mean to you, you're not going to leave him because you're the bad person. You are the one who's insecure and went through his phone. And, you're taking your old insecurities, bringing it into our relationship, the way that they flip everything on you. DARVO is one of the worst tactics that is really one of the greatest tactics for an abuser, because it is the perfect way for them to avoid accountability. And that is exactly what narcissistic people do. But abusers are just so good at evading accountability of any kind. And it's great when they can flip it and redirect that onto you. I think it's horrible. The original issue gone, right? So quickly. And then you find yourself being defensive and reacting even. I hate the phrase reactive abuse. I truly despise it. I've heard it called a reactive response. I've heard it, a reactive behavior. I've heard it called self-defense. I think that's a little far, but I hate the phrase reactive abuse. I think it's also misunderstood. A lot of people think that it applies to his behavior. He is engaging in reactive abuse by making you react. That's not where the term came from. It's more accurate, but it really means she is the abuser by reacting to abuse. And I very sarcastically will ask people, what is a good reaction to being abused? Perhaps leaving, but that's easy to say. But in the moment, we can react very badly. Abusers are good at poking you until you absolutely explode. I see it like a pressure cooker. What have you seen with this reactive, let's call it reactive response?
Well, I call it you go into fight. That is what you're doing. Your nervous system is going into fight because it is under threat. So again, I dislike that language. It's reactive abuse, etc. But yes, we could break it down and say you are reacting to the abuse that you're enduring, but actually your nervous system is going into fight because it has no other option. It is scanning what is happening, and you can either go into flight or fight. And fight can be arguing, could be shouting, could be throwing a plate, could be pushing because you feel under threat. So actually, I just say your nervous system is in a trauma response and it's doing its job. It's protecting you.
If you feel that, it's coming from somewhere, right? We don't just start screaming out of nowhere. There's a provocation. But you know where it gets kind of, to me, it's not a gray area, but I can understand that to people who are not so trained on this, it looks like a gray area of, well, I need context and I need to understand what happened. And I think people very easily on the outside put themselves into the role of judge and jury, but that's really unfair to the victim. I think in the moment when this is happening and we react explosively, like I still remember a time where I was so angry, I stood up and flung a glass of water in his face. It was so out of a movie. I don't do that. I've never thrown anything, water, an object, nothing at any person ever, no matter how mad I've been. And I've been in relationships that are toxic even. But this was like, oh my God, I was beside myself with rage, not anger, not fury, rage. And I just exploded and I walked out of the room. But first having thrown water. Those little things, right? And I remember he actually was recording me. It was so cliche now in hindsight. Yeah. He was recording me. And I swear, if I had that, I would post it. I would show like this. I know it would create confusion and people would be like, oh, look, she's throwing things. But that's what happens to people. Yeah. We lose our minds and essentially. But I love it being called a fight response. I think that's incredibly clear on the outside. When you're in it, why do you think so many women just see that as like, oh, see, I'm unstable too. I'm the problem.
Because you have reacted. And you've reacted in exactly the way the narcissist wants you to react. Because yes, they have the phone on record. I have one myself. I wish I could post mine. I wasn't unfortunately given mine. But yeah, they push and push and push and push. And because you are human, you have a limit. We all have limits. And coercive and controlling behaviour, they do it in such a way where they don't have to touch you. It's all done psychologically. So they're pushing you, that they couldn't be hours of where they're just putting you down, chipping away. They don't even have to shout at you. It can just be how we're talking now and just putting you down for hours until you just explode. And they do this on purpose because they want that explosive reaction where you throw a drink at them or if you hit them or whatever. And they actually smile when you do it. You can see the glee in their eyes like, yes, I've got her. The video recording, I'm calling him all the names under the sun. He's getting in my way. I'm pushing him, get out of my way. So if you'd listen to that recording, I sound nuts. And he's like, why are you pushing me? Why are you pushing me? And I'm just like, fuck off. And it's because you get to the point where it's like, you're no longer present. Your brain has gone offline. You're in flight. You've seen red because your nervous system can't take any more. And it is part of the torture that they do to you. And it is torture. Yes, you might be, but you're not tied to a chair where you're just, being prodded, etc. But you're in an invisible prison anyway when you're living with a narcissist. And when people say, well, why didn't you just get up and leave? You can't, because there are severe consequences if you get up and leave.
Huge ones. Huge. I've tried that. So again, so sarcastic, right? Oh, just leave? Oh my God. I'm so glad you said that because I am too stupid to ever have thought that just leaving would solve my problem. It's so baffling how people think that. When you said you're seeing red, you brought me back to a moment where he woke me up, and it must have been 2:00 in the morning, woke me up and explained to me that our couples counselor had done an exercise with him. And as an aside, I've spoken to her. This is not an actual exercise, but so don't anyone think this works, because it doesn't. But he was talking, I guess their conversation had something to do with when he's in the red zone, how can he bring himself back to the green zone, which you don't have to know anything about exercises to know, but like that just makes sense. What he did was wake me up at 2:00 in the morning, screaming at me to get in the red zone. Get in the red zone! Red! Get in the red! Screaming at me. And then when I was just hysterical, he was like, go green, now, green, immediately. I was like, and it made me just flip my lid. I was screaming like a lunatic at 4:00 in the morning, because it had been going on for 2 hours. That wasn't recorded, but if it had been, he would have recorded just that last bit, and I would have looked like a lunatic because I was screaming, I was name calling. That is not who I am. And I had spent at that point 9 years not reacting. So the last 6 months was pretty horrific because I had been so contained and actually much more freeze and fawn over that time that this fight response was just dying to come out of me. But I felt horrible the next day. I have to admit, he never convinced me that I was the problem, but I definitely wondered why this was happening. But I just see so commonly women feel like that. What would you say to women who feel like that response makes them the perpetrator?
No, it just makes you human. That is what I want you to realize, that you are a human being and we all have limits. And just take your example and scenario. That's not normal. If someone is waking you up at 2:00 in the morning, screaming at you, riling you up, trying to get that response from you, that's not normal. Nobody that loves you would want to get you into that state and to push you in there for their own benefit. You know, he was getting enjoyment from that power, that control, was seeing you break, seeing you lose your mind, and having that audacity to be like, okay, you can go green now. Oh, thanks.
Right. One of the worst experiences of my life, truly like the most crazy making situation I think I've ever truly been in. You lose yourself, in these moments. And it's a very painful experience, obviously, to be in an abusive relationship, but to be looking at the person that you think you love, that in theory loves you, these are the beliefs, and to realize that he knows what he's doing, that he benefits from this, that he probably enjoys it, at least to a degree, but that this is willful in so many ways, right? I know conscious, unconscious, whatever, but they know that they get what they want based on doing this behavior. And the truth is, if I woke up him at that hour and did what he did, he would lose his mind, which is proof to me that these abusers know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it purposefully. I think the biggest miss that so many of us make is that people aren't out there in the world just hurting you for basically no reason. You don't have to have done anything. We're very like, what did I do to make him this way? Instead of, this is a person who is just cruel for the sake of being cruel.
Absolutely. And people say, do they know that they're like this? Yes, they know they're like this. Behind closed doors, they are one version to you that treats you horrifically, abuses you, makes you feel worthless, enjoys seeing you cry, enjoys seeing you break. And then on the outside world to a party, oh, my beautiful wife, but this, and so caring, so loving to the neighbours. Oh, I'll cut your grass for you. Oh, you want some milk? I'll grab that for you. I'll get the newspaper. Walk through the door and puts you down and makes you feel absolutely worthless. They know exactly what they're doing because if it's controlled. So never, ever make that excuse of he doesn't know what he's doing, because he does. He's choosing to do it to you. He's enjoying it. Because if he can go and get the paper for the neighbour, if he can cut the grass for next door, and then he comes home and abuses you, he knows what he's doing.
I think it's so clear on the outside, but I think the disbelief really gets you when you're actually in it. Because the thought that not only do these people exist, you are with this person. And if you're with this person and they are in fact just abusing you on purpose, knowingly, you need to leave. You need to uproot your entire life. You were wrong. You were stupid for staying. All of the thoughts and feelings and shame that come at you when you believe this. I think that sort of cognitive dissonance of they are good and bad, or simplified, but they're good and bad at the same time. They're abusive and they love you. It's like just the most horrible feeling. I can understand why Dr. Peter Salerno coined the term traumatic cognitive dissonance.
Very, very common, where I've had quite a few clients come to me and said that they will go and do something nice outside, like do the grass or speak to some neighbours, come home, open the windows, and then start very quietly on the wife and push until she's shouting. So the neighbours can hear. And then the next, it'll be, oh yeah, did you hear her? Yeah, this is what I have to put up with. And so the neighbours thinks the wife is crazy and that she's the perpetrator and the poor man has to deal with this all the time. That is heartbreaking. So I just say to clients, if you know what the reaction that the abuser wants, give the opposite if you can, if you feel safe, or try not to. If you notice, because I think when you can see it, you can't unsee it, but you can also think, right, he's wanting me to lose it because he's just opened the windows. I know if it's a sunny day, everyone's outside. Just don't. Just think, no, because if I shout and scream, he's going to get exactly what I want. Where if you say, okay, I completely hear you. Yeah, you're right. It'll be, what? So once you can see it and you have some tools to try and manage it, and if you feel safe enough to, then definitely do it. But yeah, you've got to have an outlet somewhere.
I think what's interesting about what you suggested too is that when you don't give the explosive response that they want and you say, okay, yeah, I agree with you, even though you don't, right? But you say, I agree. Look how mad they get. That's evidence that he doesn't want compliance, because that's people think abusers want compliance. Sometimes they also want responses. They want explosions. So they can prove that you're the problem, so that they can make themselves feel better, so they can record it, so they can make you think you're crazy, so that they feel powerful because they can create these big emotional responses from you. They're in control of your feelings. So it's actually, again, if you're safe to, I think it's a great thing to be able to kind of take a breath and just say, okay, yeah, you're right.
Because they enjoy this. If you're crying and someone is smiling, they can actually smile with their eyes. Like that, you can see it. It's like, I've got her. Yeah. And then that's cheered them up for the day, and then they carry on going, and then you're left broken for the rest of the day. And then trying to piece your back together, and then what can I do? Oh, I have screamed and shouted. And that's another thing. People say, but I did scream and shout at him. I did throw a glass of water over him, so I'm just as bad as him. No, you're not. You have responded to probably hours or something that has happened. And, Lisa, you bring up a really, really good point. And I recognize this within myself. I was never angry before him. You'd never thrown a glass of water. If you are acting out of character because you are around this specific person, then that just goes to show more about the person that you're around as opposed to you. Yes. Because we're only responding to what we're enduring.
So, but let me ask you this, because I know this is a hard one to kind of pinpoint because you're not there in these people's relationships, and nor am I. But we're talking about how the abuser provokes us into this reaction. An abuser would be the first person to say, no, you did this and I'm reacting to you. You provoked me. How do you get through that with someone?
Again, I would say, was you like this in a past relationship? Did you feel like this at the beginning of the relationship? When did you start noticing that there's this change in you? And so we just kind of break it down, go back, and then we start unpicking things. And actually it's, well, I started doing this when he would do this or when he would do that. And so actually it's ever since you've been with him in the past however long. So this isn't you. This is your responses. This person is getting you to respond in this way. And tell me about his past relationship, because most narcissists will always say, my ex was nuts. She was crazy. So, I can say my past relationships, not all were horrific. Some just naturally ended because So if everyone's ex is absolutely crazy, that's another red flag. But just remember who you are and who you were before the relationship and when you went into it. And when did you start noticing you changing, like you becoming angry, etc. So yeah, it's always good to reflect on when and where.
I see a lot of women, what I call, get their PhD in narcissistic abuse on YouTube University. Women read the books and the podcasts and go to the group workshops and listen to TikToks and Instagram reels and YouTube videos, constantly learning and absorbing everything and trying to figure out, is he avoidant or abusive? Is it trauma? Is it this? Is he a narcissist? Is he borderline? Maybe it's his mom. Maybe his ex-girlfriend is crazy. Maybe it's all these different reasons and we're trying so hard or to fix ourselves, right? How to calm the nervous system. You can't calm your nervous system while you're in an active threat, but we're sitting here trying so hard to improve ourselves. I almost feel like we become borderline obsessed with fixing ourselves or him or the relationship instead of step back, look at the pattern and figure out how to extricate yourself from the relationship. Why is that so hard for people, do you think, to stop obsessing over all the content?
I think because we want answers. We want to know how to fix this. Is there a pill? Is there something? Is there a magic wand? No, there's not. And I was guilty of this as well. I was trying to figure out, was it a parent issue? Is it, something for me to say, look, if you go and see this doctor, if you go and see that psychiatrist, then they're going to fix you. It doesn't happen. I think as well, as humans, we want to know everything. We want to know what this is. For me, I definitely wanted to know what the hell was happening to me because, like many people say, I'm an intelligent woman. How have I ended up here? And it doesn't matter how intelligent you are. This can get anybody. There is nothing you can do to fix them. So cut your losses and focus on you because they are not going to change and you cannot change them. In fact, we can't change anyone. Change has to come from within ourselves. So if you focus on you, then that's where you're going to see change. And talking about the nervous system, you cannot turn off your nervous system because if it didn't go into fight, flight, or freeze or fawn, it wouldn't be doing its job. You wouldn't be alive. So you cannot stop your nervous system from doing its job. Your brain is there to keep you alive. It's not to keep you happy. So it's constantly scanning to keep you alive and it will do what it needs to do that. So trust yourself, love yourself more to know that actually my nervous system is doing what it needs to do.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I just see so many women just doing so much and reading all the books and taking every course and going to therapy. All the while, he's doing absolutely nothing, right? It all gets put on us. And that's a painful experience. I think, I talk often about the sort of 3 steps to getting out of these relationships. I make it sound so easy. I know. 3 steps. First step is education and clarity. And that's where you get your little, PhD on YouTube University, right? You need that. You need the clarity. You need the information and education. You need labels like DARVO and coercive control, narcissism, even when it applies. That matters to start to label things so you can start to see. But I think, and I think you agree, it sounds like that the real work comes from when you let go why he's doing that and what it is about him. And you just start to go, what am I here? Not from a place of judging yourself at all, but from a place of curiosity. What is it about this or about me or my experience, my life, that makes me think that being treated this way is okay or normal or excusable or acceptable? And you start doing some inner work. I think that's where you really start to see the shift. And I know when I first started working with people, I was very focused on specifically, getting into and breaking a trauma bond. But there's so much work to be done after in that sort of rebuilding stage. And I've geared a lot of what I do and talk about to how you actually heal yourself. I don't know that, I don't really believe in the concept of you become healed and then that's it. I think it is a lifelong thing, which is a great thing to just keep focusing on yourself and loving yourself. It's an incredible experience. And I hope that more women do that and don't feel so responsible for what they've been through.
Absolutely. And just because you leave in an abusive relationship does not mean that the abuse stops. You then go into post-separation abuse. And sometimes that can be worse than the abuse that you endured in the relationship. So there's so many different layers and there's not one shot that fits all. There's no recovery that's going to fix everybody. Everybody's different. Every scenario is different. Every abusive relationship is different. So learning what this is absolutely key. Like that is stage 1. Like the psych education, it's so, so important because it clarifies, I'm not the problem. This isn't me. You need to have that because if you have been like myself, blaming myself, if I'd have only just kept my mouth shut or if I'd have just let that go and I didn't bite on that, then, we could still be together and have this amazing relationship. Once you come to terms with that was never going to happen, you are asking your nervous system to not work. And to not work means you're not alive. So that was never going to happen. And then you've got to go into, right, okay, one, is it safe enough to leave? Because not always. And then you've got to get your ducks in a row. Always get your ducks in a row first. Because leaving a narcissist, divorcing a narcissist, honestly, it's horrific. So you have to make sure that one, it's safe, and two, that you've got to get your ducks in a row and get support, friends, family, therapists, whoever is going to help you through that journey, because it is a very bumpy and traumatic journey. It's worth it, because I'm an example, Lisa, you're an example of recovering, where you can go if it's done properly. It's definitely not overnight. I'm 7 years in, and do I still have flashbacks? Obviously, I work in this industry. I talk about this every day. So yes, my nervous system is always triggered by this, but I've learned a way to cope with it. And my purpose now is to help and support others. But, there is no fixed in this. This does change you. Anyone that says, oh, it doesn't, yes, it does. If you have been affected by a narcissist, it is definitely. But I always say, you would have picked up so many skills that you don't even realize it yet. And if recovery is done properly, you will not go into another narcissistic relationship. You will have so much self-love for you, self-worth, that you will not give that to any other person unless they meet every category that you're happy with, that your nervous system feels safe and happy with. And just trust yourself. Going through this recovery journey is hard, but it's worth it.
It so is. When people say that post-separation abuse is worse sometimes, or at least as bad, I get it. And I completely agree that there's no lie there at all, but know that it's still worth it, because you are better able to manage it outside of it or ignore it, even if you have kids. I know not everybody can go no contact when you have kids. I get that, but you can still get yourself out of it and live a happier life than being in that abusive relationship and constantly questioning yourself and wondering if you're the problem. I think the fact that women are finding themselves worried about whether or not they're the perpetrator of abuse tells me something really big and really important, which is that we are not the problem. Because a perpetrator of abuse is not actually wondering if they're the problem. They don't care if they're the problem. They don't see themselves as the problem. Often they see it as justified consequences, right? You did this, therefore I had to scream at you. You weren't listening to me. They don't see themselves as the problem. Even the ones that pretend, even the ones that go to therapy, that myth that no narcissist would ever go to therapy, maybe that was true at one point, but therapy is normal now. Everybody goes to therapy, no big deal. So perpetrators are using that and weaponizing it and still acting like, I'm working on myself. What are you doing? Again, still framing you as the problem. But people who intentionally control and manipulate and distort your reality, they're not sitting up at night wondering if they're hurting their spouse. He's not on YouTube learning all the things that you're learning for the same reasons. So really, I want women to look at the pattern, look at what happened before the reaction, look at who you were before this relationship. I think those are such great things. Thank you so much for this conversation. Is there anything else you want to add or say to the audience?
Oh, well, when it comes to the narcissist going to therapy, if your narcissist comes home and says, my therapist says you're the problem, the therapist says that actually you're the abuser, don't listen to that. Seriously, do not listen. I've heard that so many times, that the therapist has probably not said that. And if they have, then they don't know the situation. They don't understand this type of person that they're working with. So trust your own judgment. And actually, this isn't a you problem. This is their problem. And they're just going to therapy to abuse you continuously, to use it against you, but also as a means of supply. As you said, it's quite trendy to have a therapist now. So don't think that just because they go to therapy, they're going to come home fixed, because that is not true.
Yeah. That's also triangulation. As I was saying, that I like labels. I like being able to point to something. My therapist said, triangulation, immediately trying to discredit your feelings by bringing in some third party who allegedly said something, who probably didn't say it. And if they did, they missed the context. So we need to just take a deep breath and trust ourselves, which is easy to say and harder to do. But I know that people can work with people like you or me to help learn those things. Where can people find you?
So I own my own practice called My Trauma Therapy. So you can find me at My UK. I have an app called My Nara, which I really speak about collating evidence because you never know when you might need it, family or criminal court. You are best off having the evidence than if you don't. And also it can help you with being severely gaslit that actually, no, that did happen. You did say that and you did send that and you did smash that. So just keep as much evidence as possible. Trust me, you would rather have it than not. And even if you've just entered into a relationship, just keep everything. It might not be abusive, but it might be. And then if 2 years down the line, you end up in a criminal court case, you've got a whole pattern of abuse. And when it's not physical and it's coercive controlling behaviour, you need text messages, voice notes, emails, ring doorbell, CCTV, emails, anything at all. And don't just take pictures or collate the bad stuff. Also include the good, because wherever you are, if you're in the UK, you need to show a pattern of coercive controlling behaviour, and that does include the good.
That is huge to make note of, because I know we can get caught up with only documenting the bad. That matters so much. And I want to add that I know that your app looks like a calculator. So for people that are still in the relationship, that's a really intentional choice so that it's not noticeably an app for abuse. It is a calculator. So it looks really inconspicuous. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa.